Hey guys, it's Brian with Retired at 40, Live Life Simple, and welcome back to the kitchen. Today we're gonna see if we can freeze dry chocolate chip cookies. We're gonna do 4 different ways just to make sure that we can do that. We're gonna do all of that coming up. So I really wanna make sure that this turns out today, and that's why we're doing 4 different ways. We're gonna do, the first tray is just going to be cookie dough that we can eat raw. So we're gonna skip the egg, and we're gonna replace the egg with ground flaxseed. The second option is going to be a cookie dough without chocolate chips in it, and we're going to try and add the chocolate chips in later just in case it doesn't work, which means the third is going to be with the chocolate chips added in. And then the fourth option, we're actually going to bake the cookies. We're going to try and bake them in this pan, and then we're going to freeze dry them that way. So typically chocolate chip cookies have either butter or oil in them or both. And we know that freeze drying and oil don't really go well together. So we're gonna replace the oil today with homemade applesauce. So let's get into our lineup of ingredients first. So we're not doing butter, we're doing applesauce. Recommended as a 1-to-1 ratio. So this calls for 1 cup of butter, so we're gonna do 1 cup of applesauce. For the egg cookies, we're gonna need 1 egg. And then for the flaxseed replacement, we need a 3-to-1 ratio. So you need to basically make 1 egg, you're gonna need 3 tablespoons of water, you're gonna need 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed, and then you need to let that soak for about 5 minutes. And then the rest is pretty straightforward. We're gonna need a teaspoon of vanilla, we're gonna need 2/3 of a cup of sugar, 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 2 cups of self-rising flour, and make sure that it is self-rising, and 12 ounces of chocolate chips. And that's it. We're just gonna add everything together. So before I add the chocolate chips, I know that chocolate doesn't always do well when we're freeze drying either, but I'm hoping that because I got mini chocolate chips, I'm hoping that it'll help out. The batch I'm doing right now with the mini chocolate chips, they're gonna be the ones that go into the oven, and then the ones that we try and rehydrate raw with the chocolate chips in them. Let's do this. So if you're not getting the right consistency that you want, you can always add a little bit of extra flour until it thickens it up to the point where it looks like cookie dough should. So let's load up this first tray already. This is gonna be the tray that we're gonna bake in the oven and then try and freeze dry. I think we just want a real thin layer with this, just like that, and then we're gonna go to 375 on the oven for 8 to 10 minutes. This second tray, we're just gonna use the rest. We're gonna do the exact same thing, but we're just not gonna cook it. Right into the oven with the Harvestright tray. So I have my doubts whether replacing a couple ingredients would actually turn out. They're a little bit puffier with the self-rising flour and with the applesauce instead of the butter. But you can always use your own recipe if you don't want to use mine. They sure taste okay though. Voila! Those turned out nice. I'm just gonna go ahead and throw these right in the deep freeze. So then the second tray is actually going to just go right into the deep freeze as well, because this is the one that has chocolate chips in it that is gonna get rehydrated, and we're gonna try and cook it from there. Tray number 3. This third tray is the same recipe just without chocolate chips. So we're gonna rehydrate this, and then we'll add the chocolate chips in after it's rehydrated, which is, I just wanna make sure that we have every chance that we can to make this turn out. There's that. For tray number 4, remember this is the one that has the variation with the egg, because we are just gonna eat this raw, and I don't really wanna have raw eggs. It really just kind of turns into a mush, and we're gonna use that instead of an egg. And just to make sure that we have all of our options covered, I'm gonna do half of the dough with chocolate chips and half without. Now these are gonna go in the deep freeze, and then we'll go freeze dry. So our cookies have had plenty of time to get frozen now. So I'm gonna put the freeze dryer on pre-freeze. And that also reminds me, if you have any ideas for freeze dried videos, just let me know down in the comments section. In the meantime, we're gonna get this going. Start non-liquid cookies, pre-frozen. Also, don't forget to like the video if you found it helpful, subscribe if you haven't already, and click that bell to get notifications of new videos when they come out. Okay, everything seems like it froze really nice and solid. I think it's gonna do as well as it can do. I'm hoping that chocolate doesn't do what chocolate usually does. Maybe with the mini chips it'll change things, I'm not sure. But we're gonna find out in a couple days. All right, these have been in for 28 hours and 2 minutes, it looks like. I have my doubts that these are done, but you just never know. It's not looking good for the chocolates. They melted. That's kind of the experience I've had before, which is why I wanted to do the one without chocolate and then add the chocolate chips in. And then you can see these ones, the chocolate just melted also. But we've got those that hopefully save the day. I'm gonna go ahead and put my oven on 375 first, just so we can get that ready. Because the cookies that need to bake, those are gonna take the longest. So here's what we ended up with. These are the pre-baked. These were just the raw cookie dough with no egg. This was our dough without chocolate chips. This was our dough with chocolate chips. So I have to confess, I already knew what the chocolate was gonna do. Since there's so many new people freeze drying, and if you've never done chocolate before, I just wanted to show you what chocolate always does in the freeze dryer. It just kind of melts it. But I'm still curious to see what they taste like. Really hard. I was hoping this would be a good snack, but it's too hard and it'll break your teeth. Maybe the pre-bake will make it less. Looks like it's not going to. That's a little bit easier to eat. For some reason, it breaks it down a little bit. It's not soft by any means. I'll tell you what this would be good for though. What happens when you dip this into some milk? I'm gonna take a big old chunk of this and I'm just gonna let it sit in here. This has been sitting in here for about a minute now. Let's see what this tastes like. That's actually really good. It's softened up now. This reminds me of something. It's Cookie Crisp cereal. I think our only hope is the unbaked, because the chocolate chips are not gonna store because the chocolate's all melted. But I made a big boo-boo when I did this because I forgot to weigh this before I freeze dried it, which means I'm not gonna know how much moisture to put back into this. My other boo-boo, which you probably were already expecting, is that I use self-rising flour, and I think it started to actually rise in the freeze dryer because of the heat. Right there, you can see it real distinct. So I'm not sure if that caused it to, I don't think that was a deal killer as far as if this worked or not, but it definitely didn't help. I still haven't tried the cookie dough bites without the chocolate chips, so I'll just do that now. Ouch. This reminds me of hardtack. And if you don't know what hardtack is, it's a type of bread that preppers use, and it stores for a really long time because it's extremely dry. So I think the only way that we're gonna get this to turn out is throw it in a food processor, because this stuff is so hard. So even if I try to get the water to soak into this, it's so dry in it that I just don't think it's gonna happen. So we almost need to turn this back into a powder, back into raw ingredients. Oh my God. Wow. So this took a lot of convincing, but I finally got it down to a powder. I think that's our best shot. All right, so this would have been a whole lot easier if I would have done a measurement, because I could just add the moisture back in. I'm gonna start with about a half a cup of water, because the chamber, the frozen water in the side of the chamber, there wasn't a whole lot there. Man, I didn't think this was gonna work, but it might just work. I do think it's gonna take a while for the water, any kind of moisture to get in these little granules, but I think it's gonna work. Wow, look at that. So 3/4 of water, and I let it sit for about 10 minutes, and it looks exactly like it did before we freeze dried it. I'm gonna add these chocolate chips and we're gonna bake some cookies. All right, so is it gonna work? That's the big question. Woohoo! I think it is. It looks like it's gonna work. I probably should have flattened the cookie dough out a little bit because they're real puffy, but I think they're gonna work. They look really good. Just like Grandma used to make, except for Grandma didn't have a freeze dryer. I had really low expectations on these, but they just wowed me. They surprised me, caught me off guard, and I think they turned out exactly how you want them. Here's our one that we baked earlier in the video. Here's our freeze-dried one. They're exactly the same, and they taste good. So what have we learned from this? Number one is chocolate does not do well in the freeze dryer. Chocolate chip cookies with the chips added in, they're never gonna work. Number two, the self-rising flour, it actually worked, but I think you'd be fine using regular flour. In fact, I would probably recommend that you do use regular flour. And number three, don't eat a whole batch of chocolate chip cookies by yourself because it gives you a wicked stomach ache. Also, a really important one, applesauce instead of butter. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you liked the video, if you found it helpful. Like, subscribe, click the bell to get notifications. In the meantime, this is Retired at 40. Remember to live life simple. We'll catch you next week.